Peggle. Hello and welcome to another episode of Ferret 64 with me, your host, Yemmy the Ferret. I hope everyone's doing good this week or this weekend or whatever day that you're listening to this episode. I hope you're having a good one. Ferret 64 is, of course, the one-stop shop for video game news, occurrences, first impressions, and so much more. We got a nice, healthy slate of news and game reviews. But first, I need to invite you, the listener and or watcher, to nominate games for the Ferret Awards. I released a video on my YouTube channel discussing all the different nomination categories, and the forum link is in the description of that video, but it will also be in the link down. It will also be linked down below in this description as well. Probably the first line or second line of the description will be the link for the Google form to fill it out. Each category just needs one nomination, and if you so desire, you can also not nominate games if you haven't. Like, let's say you haven't played a game that came out this year. You don't have to fill out any of it except for the ones that are pertaining to games from other years. It's completely up to you. I will fill in the blanks as needed. But the whole video that I posted on Friday? Yesterday? Saturday? Saturday. is available to watch now, and if you don't even need to watch it, you just want to go right to the forum, that's fine too. But I would appreciate all the nominations because it is a community event, and I like to make sure that everyone has a voice in the event. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and start off this podcast with what have I been playing this past week. There's a couple of new games I could start off with, but I'm going to start with Marvel's Rivals. Marvel Rivals? There's no apostrophe S on the end of Marvel. And I've played a couple matches. I can't say that I'm having fun with it, and I think that's because it is really just like Overwatch again. It's much more closely related to Overwatch than a couple other hero shooters that have come out recently. It definitely just feels it does really just feel like a Overwatch skin. I'm sorry, a Marvel skin over Overwatch, and it doesn't matter, Overwatch 1, 2, I don't care. I'm just calling it Overwatch for right now. So don't get confused like, "Oh, which one is he talking about?" They're both the same. It doesn't really matter. And there's a couple different reasons for that. One, the game feels very similar. It has very similar physics and very similar characters here and there. It also has a very similar graphic style, even though Marvel Rivals has like a more like cell shaded approach. It is still a bit of it still is pretty similar at the end of the day in graphics. And also the game modes, like the objective modes, like push this statue through this city. It's very, very similar, and I get it. It is obviously very inspired by Overwatch, but I wasn't expecting it to be this close to Overwatch. It does have some unique things in there, like the team-up attacks and stuff like that, and obviously there's some characters who are more unique than others. But for the most part, I do feel a general lack of creativity and or depth to the characters, unlike with Overwatch, where you have Tracer, and she has the time ability, where she can rewind time for a little bit, or she has the dash. She has 3 dashes, and she also has the pistols that are akimbo, right? The akimbo machine pistols, and she also has a bomb that she can plant onto people. Like, there's so much going on there, right? And then you look at a character like Rocket Raccoon from Marvel Rivals, and he's very much like, okay, he has a Gatling gun, and he has like a secondary attack that like bounces a bullet off of a wall, I guess. And then he has like a booster pack that can boost twice and then needs to refresh. And then he has a healing turret, not turret, like a little drone that just kind of sits there. And then his ultimate is just like, I have extra damage. And that's it. And it's like, well, okay. I mean, it's fine, but... And I understand that he's supposed to team up with Groot, but if you don't have a Groot on your team, then it's like, okay. So then I was like, well, maybe if I use the Punisher, he'll have a lot of stuff. You know, you think of Soldier 76, you know, he's got, you know, a regular assault rifle. He's got the missiles. He's got the visor that comes down and auto-targets enemies, and he can run, and blah, blah, blah. And then you play as the Punisher, and it's like, okay, yeah, he has the machine gun, and he has a smoke screen, and he has a zip line, and he has an ultimate ability that makes his attacks, like, really powerful. Okay. Right, like, you think of the Punisher, and you think of, like, all the different things and ways that he uses to hunt down the bad guys, let's just say, just as base level here. A smoke grenade and a grappling hook? Okay. Groot, I think, is the most Grootish of them all, but once again, like, he feels more like a very movable Reinhardt in a way, because you can lay down shields anywhere you want. He's also very melee focused, of course, but he can also heal his allies as well. I think the main thing about the game that makes it a bit more, I guess, unique than to Overwatch is the fact that there's a lot of melee-based characters, which is obviously, you know, superheroes a lot tend to be very melee-based, but, you know, there's characters like Iron Fist and Captain America and Groot, and I think Loki is also a bit of a melee character. Venom, for sure. All these characters need to be like right up in the face of the enemies, and in Overwatch, I don't think there's really too many characters that just have a melee. Hanzo, Hanzo's the bow and arrow guy. I forget their names at the. I don't care. But even then, like, they have ranged abilities. Like the guy who uses sword slashes, who I can't remember his name right now. He's a silver armor, and a green sword. I can see it in my head. He has like the shuriken that he can throw, right? And it, like Iron Fist, I don't remember him having any melee. Any ranged ability. He just kind of has his fists, and he has like these like combos they can do, right? So it's a bit like awkward at times to try and hone in on the enemies, especially if you're a melee character, because you gotta really rely on the verticality of the maps, which doesn't always work, because there's like tunnels and there's bridges and stuff like that where there's nowhere to really hide. And even though it's fun to try it out, this is not a game that I am going to be playing too much more of. Now that I finally beat my 200th game this year, I'll probably just like play a couple more rounds and call it a day and mark it as done. Because really, at the end of the day, it doesn't really offer me anything that Overwatch didn't, and I kind of played Overwatch to death. And Marvel Rivals, it just has that same feel to it. And I get it. You know, you can probably be like, oh, but Yemmy, you play Call of Duty every year. And it's like, yeah, I do. But like, Call of Duty is my gaming garbage, I like to call it. Like it's my series that I can play and just kind of be like, okay, I'm having fun. And even at its core, like, say what you want, the gameplay does feel different through entries. Like Black Ops 6 feels different than Modern Warfare 3 or 2. So I don't think that it's an issue for me where it's like every year it just feels the same, where it does feel different nowadays. And even though you have a couple years in between of like Call of Duty Cold War and Black Ops 6, I do remember Cold War feeling a bit different than Black Ops 6. And with Marvel Rivals, it just feels the same as Overwatch. And like I said, I've kind of played Overwatch to death. I don't really want to play any more Overwatch. And here I am playing another Overwatch, essentially. At least with a game like Paladins or even Concord, they definitely are inspired by Overwatch, but they had something unique going on. Like Concord was much more like team deathmatch focused and like a secure the objective focus. It wasn't. Did I say Overwatch? I meant Concord. It's a little bit early for me. I do apologize. My brain's a little bit scrambled right now. Concord was much more focused on the PvP aspect of the hero shooter brawler whatever. That made it a bit more unique. It also did have a fair amount of fairly like unique abilities in there, but obviously a lot of them were taken from other hero shooters and stuff like that. Paladins was very much a one-for-one kind of Overwatch type game, but it made up for it because it had a very different feel to it. The game was much more quick. The characters moved around faster. You had like the horses that you started off with that you could ride on the horses for a little while. Like there's a lot going on in that game that I thought was good enough to make it different enough from Overwatch. And you look at a game like Battleborn, which is also a game that was very much compared to Overwatch at the time. And once again, like it was Overwatch coded, but at the end of the day, it was more League of Legends inspired because you were, battling with these characters who were trying to stop the minions from getting to the objective. So where those games have various differences that make them unique, Marvel Rivals really is just Overwatch. And it's not a completely bad thing because Overwatch is still like the gameplay is still fun at times and it still has a good stuff going on. But when you're kind of annoyed or done with these kind of hero shooters, they all start to just meld together. And for me personally, I was hoping that Marvel Rivals was going to give me something where it's like, oh, I could play this all day. Oh, but at this point, I don't feel like it's going to do that. And yeah, I'm just kind of like, okay, all right, we're here, and I do like the characters. Like, I like the design of the characters. I think that they did a good job with that, melding the comic book world with video games. And I have been playing a lot of Marvel games recently with that Capcom Fighting Collection, so I am getting to know some of these characters a little bit more intimately as I go through it. But I'm not like blown away by this game by any means, and I'm also not like willing to invest too much more time into it. That's the thing about multiplayer games is there's really no end goal for you. I mean, sure, there's a season pass and there's a whatever, but there's really no end goal for me personally. And I mean, there's a lot like it is nice that you get all the characters for free. Like all the characters are unlocked for free, and the battle pass is only $5, and that's nice. But where I struggle is that gameplay. It just feels like a game that I've already put plenty of hours into. I don't even remember how much I played the original Overwatch when that came out. It must have been 50 to 60 hours minimum. And then Overwatch 2 was launched, it's pretty much just Overwatch 1 at the end of the day. But Greedy and I and Callus and a couple other people, we played that for a fair amount. It wasn't like we picked it up one week and dropped the next. We played that quite a fair. We gave it its fair share. And by the time that I was done playing the Overwatch games, I was like, yeah, I'm kind of like done with the hero shooters unless there's one that does a real 180 on the genre. And Marvel Rivals just isn't that game. So, like I said, I'll probably play a couple more matches, probably play maybe another day or so, and then I'll call it because I don't see myself randomly just being like, oh, my eyes are open to the beauty of Marvel Rivals. I don't see that. I don't see that happening. But if you want to try it out, it's free on pretty much every platform. Steam, PlayStation, Xbox, etc. I believe it's also on Switch, maybe. Don't quote me on that. But it is free, which is nice. You don't have to pay. And once again, like this is a big property. This is Marvel. So having all these characters and having this whole game for free to play is actually a very good deal. I mean, especially for something that's Marvel, that's created by Disney at this point, right? You expect them to charge, you expect Marvel Rivals to be the game that's charging $40 for a hero shooter and not Concord, right? So it's kind of it's nice to see it being free to play and having such a cheap season pass with actual good rewards. And like I was sifting through it, I was like, oh, some of this stuff is actually pretty cool. Like there's some new skins in there. There's some new like emotes and stuff, which is also a very funny thing. You can have like the Punisher do an emote, and it's like I don't think he would ever do this in his life if he was a real person. But here we are. We're in the Fortnite-minded version of Marvel, I guess. So that's that. Marvel Rivals. It's fun in small doses, but I've been there, done that. I think that's a good way to describe it. Next up, AntonBlast. This game just released on Thursday, and I was very excited to try out AntonBlast. Obviously, it's very Wario Land coded, and it also is very Pizza Tower as well. I believe this game was announced before Pizza Tower, but it just so happened that Pizza Tower came out first, and AntonBlast came out a year later. Obviously, the two games are different enough, so it's not like it's just a one-for-one, like, oh, we're playing the same thing again, like Marvel Rivals versus Overwatch. But they do share a lot of similarities. There's some character design in there you can see was, kind of who knows who did for what first. In my opinion, like, I know there's probably going to be some people who are like, oh my god, I can't believe AntonBlast and Pizza Tower came at the same time. They must have been in cahoots. They must have been watching what each other was doing and copying off of each other. There is a world where both these games were being developed at the same time, and neither of them knew that they were developing these games and how similar these games are going to be to each other, right? Pizza Tower, I love Pizza Tower. I'm going to try and not talk about Pizza Tower too much as compared to AntonBlast because they are two different games at the end of the day. But Pizza Tower was a jam. There's a lot of unique things going on inside of Pizza Tower that was inspired by Wario Land, the Wario Land series, but they kind of did their own spins on it and obviously added more things in there. The main thing that Pizza Tower is all about is doing like wall climbing and grabbing enemies and throwing them, and then there's also that parry move that they added into the game, so you get like a frame of invincibility and you can automatically pick up an enemy if you parry them. In AntonBlast, it's not about wall running and grabbing enemies and whatever. He has a hammer, and this hammer is how you pretty much do everything in the game. So if you want to do a big jump, you slam the hammer onto the ground and he jumps up high. Or if you want to hit an enemy, you spin around like a top and you hit them. And if you want to like dive into a trash can, you jump up into the air and you dive into the trash can with the hammer, So you do a lot of stuff with the hammer, and a lot of the special things that you do throughout a level is based on the hammer too. So there's like these little like tornado things that you run into, and they cause you to do a super spin, which turns into like a bit of like a top, and you can like super spin everywhere. And I haven't really seen anything else that is comparable to the super spin so far. I beat the first boss, and I'm on the second level after that first boss, and the levels haven't been I know I said I wasn't going to talk about Pizza Tower too much, but Pizza Tower had a way of each level being very unique, having something new going on, or adding on to your moveset, right, or what you expect from the game. Where AntonBlast, it's a bit stagnant. It's a bit one tone, where it's like, okay, you're using the hammer to platform, and you got to go through this level pretty fast. But it's not really adding anything super crazy or super new onto the table with each level. Like, it does add new things here and there, but much like Pepper Grinder earlier in the year, there are like 3 levels grouped together that are very similar, and then you get something new. Like, oh, you have a bunch of these samey levels, and then, oh, but here's a level with water comes out of the ground. You can platform off the water, and also there's like slides that you can go on, and you can do platforming off the slides, and there's platforms that move in and out. And then you'll have that for like another couple of, they'll add those into the next couple levels, and then, oh, here's a new thing. So that's the one thing that has kind of been I kind of been dragging my feet getting through the game, even though it's fun and there's plenty of moments that I thought or I think that are very exciting. The problem is that it's a very one note kind of game so far. There's really not much that I can see them doing with how the character controls, and I can't see them doing much more with it, which is kind of unfortunate. And it's a very like stagnant kind of game in terms of like level design. It's very much like using the same stuff from the past levels, and I mean, and that's fine if that's what you're looking for. But for me personally, to keep me interested in a game like this that is very similar to other games that I've played and not as good as some of those other games as well, like I would very much rather play Pizza Tower and or Wario Land 3 at this point instead of Anton Blast. I think that it's struggling to really put a foothold in my mind at least, for these Wario Land inspired games. And we've had a couple of them recently come out. And yeah, this one is definitely the one that I would say has been the most basic out of all of them. Like, even though it does have a unique control scheme and Anton does control pretty uniquely as compared to Peppino, um, I'm just not finding it as fun as Pizza Tower was, or even as fun as Wario Land, the Wario Land series was. So that's one of the things that it kind of puts a damper on the experience, because I want to like it, I want to enjoy it. I don't go into a game, I don't buy a game for what was this one, $15. I don't buy a game for $15 expecting to hate it, like unless it's like unless it's by that studio that did like the King Kong game or the fucking Walking Dead game. Those games you can kind of go into expecting to hate it, but Anton Blast was a game that I went into it like I really wanted to enjoy it. I really wanted to be as good as Pizza Tower or even the original series of Wario Land games that it's based off of. But it just feels like a been there, done that kind of thing, because Pizza Tower did it better in my opinion. And even though, yeah, they're two separate games, they have two different control schemes, they have two different, very different characters. It's hard to not compare and contrast the two, especially while you're playing it, because they're two games from the same tree essentially. And it does that whole thing where it's like, okay, you press the button at the end of the level and you got to run back through the level, which I liked in Pizza Tower, and obviously, I think it was Wario Land Shake It they did that in, right? But in this game, it's like, all right, why are we running back to the entrance of the level? Because the story is a bit bizarre. So essentially, the devil, he's like, I'm red. I'm so red. I love red. Am I the reddest of them all? And his magic mirror is like, no, there is one other, Anton Blast, and his girlfriend. So the devil sends like his minions to steal all the booze from Anton's refrigerator or cabinet, and then they leave. So Anton decides to, because Anton's like a living dynamite stick or something like that, he decides to blow up their cities or whatever. But it's hard. Like, is it their cities? I'm not sure actually. But essentially that's the thing. So you go through a level, and you at the end of the level is like the TNT detonator, and you detonate that, and the buildings are destroyed, and then you have to run back through the level as the level's blowing up essentially. But what would have been more fun is like blowing up that building and then, I don't know, going back through the level and manually exploding those charges, or maybe planting the charges on your way there in some like goofy wacky mini game or something like that. It just doesn't feel cohesive as you go through it. Like you go through this whole level, and just randomly at the end it's like, and you blow up the building or you blow up this, and you have to run back through the entire thing. And obviously the way that you go back through changes because they block off some sections and force you to go different directions. But for the most part, it is kind of like just going reverse through most of the level, which is fine in a game like Pizza Tower, where it makes sense to go back through the level. But in this one, it's just like, okay, I guess we're just doing this because that's what the other games did, right? And it is nice that you get to play as either Anton or his girlfriend, so you do have the choice there to play as either character. It doesn't really change the gameplay at all, but it is nice to have that option. The music is really good in the game. I mean, I would say that it's a pretty good soundtrack for the game. It encapsulates the tone of the game pretty well with it just kind of being like this crazy frenzy, you know. But I keep going back to in my mind, yes, Pizza Tower just kind of did it better, and it's unfortunate, but it's just a fact. And I wish that I was enjoying this game more. At this point, I feel like I will finish it up. Like I will go through the entire thing. I think it's only like a 5-hour game or something like that, so it's not even too bad in that sense. But if it starts to drag again, I'll probably end up dropping it eventually. But yeah, I do plan on playing it a bit more throughout the week, and we'll see where I'm at next week. We'll see if I finish it up or if I decide to move on to something else. Speaking of something else, I played a game called Entropy Survivors. This is like a Vampire Survivors inspired game where you control a singular character and you wipe out hordes of enemies. And the difference between this game and Vampire Survivors or even Brotato is the fact that you control when the frog guy he shoots and then the mech guy swings a sword. So they kind of work in tandem together. So there's a frog on top of a mech suit. And you choose where they aim, and you choose when they shoot. So you can blast the enemies, and you can use the sword attack. And I thought this was going to be a more fun game than it is. I feel bad for saying that, but it's just true. Like Vampire Survivors was really a genie in a bottle type moment. You had this. There's a great idea there. It's pixel art. You don't have to like. It's a very much like hands off experience. You still control the character, but they kind of do their own thing as you move around the map. And that's kind of like the genius of a game like that, like Brotato, like Vampire Survivors. And Entropy Survivors is like, well, if you like those games but you wanted more control, well, here you go. And even though the game is fun, I've just kind of been like not super into it, which is unfortunate because I thought that it was going to be like a cool, like, kind of like roguelike kind of game, but instead it's just kind of like, okay, you survive for 30 minutes and you beat some bosses and you beat waves of enemies and you upgrade your character as you go along, but it just doesn't feel that great. And I think the main thing is like the abilities are so random too. Like you start off and it's like, oh, you get like an auto turret if like there's almost like Vampire Survivors. There's these gems that you crack open, and there's like an upgrade inside of it. So you get like a auto turret, or you get like a sonic blast or something like that, or missiles come out every so often. But then you open some and it's like, okay, a dump truck drives across the field, or okay, a dozer, a bulldozer piles up enemies and you can kill them in a clump. It's just like very strange, like this very random power-ups and abilities compared to the other stuff that's in the game as well. I also feel like your character just isn't strong enough. Like you're in a mech suit, like give me like a booster. Like obviously there's a dodge button, but like give me like a booster. Give me like a maybe have like the gun and the sword be one and the same. Like have your like guy, like your mech suit, have a gun in one hand and have a sword be in the other hand. You can still utilize the frog being in the suit. I don't think that really matters that much, but I think it would just be so much more cohesive if you just have like boom 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 and slash, boom 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 and slash. Because I like these kind of games where it's like a horde survival kind of thing, and you try and survive as long as you can. This one just does not feel that great. Whereas Brotato and Vampire Survivors feel good to play, even though you have less hands-on stuff to do with it. It's still very, very fun. Charting out what you want to do in your head, like, oh, I want to get like the machine guns, and I want to get the power ups that power up your bullets. So I'm going to be a bullet guy. Or like with Vampire Survivors, like, oh, I'm going to start with the old man who uses garlic, and I'm going to upgrade the garlic all the way, and then I'm going to also do other things with it. There's ways to plan your runs like that. Whereas with Entropy Survivors, it's like you get what you get. And the character moves really slowly, and the enemies are very tanky for whatever reason, and It just doesn't add up in my mind. And so with Entropy Survivors, I wish that I enjoyed it, but I think at this point I'll probably get a refund for it here because I'm just like not gelling with it at all. And I was hoping, like, the trailers made it look really fun, and I was watching some gameplay before I bought it, and I thought I thought it was going to be something like that I would enjoy, but I ended up not really enjoying it, and I found myself wishing that I was playing anything else but Entropy Survivors at the end of the day, which is unfortunate. I apologize. Like, if you're a developer and you're listening to this, I do apologize. It's just my personal opinion. I'm sure there's lots of people who love this game. I'm sure there's lots of people who are going to really connect with this game and play it to death. I am not one of those people. Sorry. All right, another new game that I beat this week, or played this week, I did beat this one, was Mouthwashing. And this is a pretty crazy, psychedelic, just kind of very off-the-wall, oddball kind of game. And a game that I think is very good, but a game that is probably not going to connect with everyone who plays it, but I could see a lot of people enjoying this. Now, the genre, like, I guess the genre would be like horror, like, not really survival horror. I mean, I guess there's like a couple parts where it's like oh my gosh, it's like survival horror, but it's hard to really place like a specific genre on this one, because it is a couple like kind of meshed together, and it's not exactly what it seems either. And I don't want to give away too much because I do feel like let me just start off by saying I recommend playing this game. I recommend playing this one. If you're, whether you like horror or narrative or whatever, it's a very interesting game. It covers a lot of different themes and stuff like that. And I think that at the end of the day, it is worth playing. There's like 3 moments in this game that are very, very standout, and they're big moments. It's not like they're like little tiny moments. They're big moments. And I think there's 3 moments that really stand out that I really, really enjoyed. And there's there's already like a lot of people doing like deep lore dives and explaining every little aspect of the game, which I do. I love that people are really latching on to this game. But the other thing too is I was hoping, like, as I'm talking to you, I'm hoping that you go into it blind. I hope that you don't go into it looking at everything that this game could be or what this game is or watching someone else play it. I really do feel like if you go into it blind, you're gonna the twists and turns are gonna really excite you. And if you go into it without that, it might be a more boring experience because you know what's coming up. So the one thing that I love about this game though is it really does cool things with the scene transitions in the game. So back in the day, I know it might be tough to think back all the way when you were using a Windows XP computer to play games, but back in the day, there was a crash that would happen when you were playing a game where you would move your mouse around the around the screen. If you were playing like a first-person shooter, your gun would be moving around the screen, or you'll be moving the camera around in the 3D space, and everything would be like real blurry, and it would kind of like phase like a wave in front of you because it's not like loading things properly. I think there was also like a screensaver that was kind of like that too. That's how they do the scene transitions in the game. Like all of a sudden you feel like the game crashed and you're like, oh god, what happened? But then all of a sudden it's like you start moving your cursor around and it's like, oh, it's just kind of loading the next area and it's doing like the whole like wavy thing. I thought that was such a nice way of doing it. It's a very unique way of loading in to the next like chapter of the game, essentially. I think that the way that the game tells its story is fine. It's serviceable. I don't prefer games that have a non-linear storytelling method. Like, I don't mind it for the most part, but there are a couple games that I would wish just told the story linearly. With this game, I'm kind of on the fence because I understand why they did it non-linearly. I'm going to stop saying that word because it's hard for me to say. But like I don't mind that this one did that. But it is still like a nagging thing for me personally because I do think that I do think the story would have had a better punch if you just went through it, boom, 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 chronologically. And I had the same issue with Beyond Two Souls earlier this year, if you don't recall. But it's not detrimental to the experience. I think it's fine for what it is, but it's not detrimental to the experience. I think the story is very good. It's very well written, even though it's a bit predictable in one aspect. I think for the most part, it is a very, very good story. I don't want to talk about the standout moments in the game because it is very spoilery. The one thing that I would like to say is the first standout moment. You're being chased by like this invisible enemy, but throughout the game you've been using like this black light to find codes around the ship, and essentially the black light is the only thing that can see the monster. So there's really these really good moments where it's like running around and you gotta be really still or else it will hear you, and you look up with the black light and oh my god, there's the fucking monster right there, but it can't see you, but it was one of those moments that I thought was really good. And I don't want to spoil anything else because I really would like you to personally play it and experience them, but that was like the first like real standout moment where I was like, okay, this is really hooking me. If you want to know, the story for the game is you're one of a group of people who is they're like transporting. They're like a delivery service. They're like in Futurama, Planet Express. You're delivering a load of cargo to a planet, and you're a lot of the delivery stuff has been automated, so you're like one of the last like freighters that actually is human operated. So as you're going through to deliver this, something happens and the ship crashes. And what happens when the ship crashes is like all this foam comes out of the walls to seal the air, make it airtight still. So not only do you have to worry about personal relationships with everyone else, kind of button heads while the days go on, but also you're worried about like, oh, is the ship going to last or whatever. So that is the main gist of it. I'm not going to go any more into detail. And I think that you should play the game if you so desire. If you want a bit of a spooky experience, there's a couple puzzles in there. There's also a very strong narrative. And it also covers a wide range of topics. There are some, I guess, triggering topics as well. So I guess just be careful. Maybe if you are someone who is easily, I don't know if triggered is the right word, but easily triggered to certain things, maybe you want to look at like the warning on the game. But it does dive into some places that are a bit uncomfortable, as you may have guessed from a game that is like Mouthwashing with such a anxiety-inducing graphic style and kind of claustrophobic atmosphere, So it just seems right that it also covers a wide range of important topics. So if you want to check that out, it's like $10 on Steam. It's not even that much money. I think it's a very good game. It has the same graphic style as something like I talked about earlier this year, like Arctic Eggs. I feel like I liked Arctic Eggs better just because it was a very unique game. But Mouthwashing was still very good. I don't know if it's gonna reach like the top 10 list, but it was very good. I did enjoy it, and I think most people would too, if you're a fan of these kind of games. And also, me, I'm a sucker for like that old school graphic style, like Arctic Eggs and like that rally game that came out earlier this year that I really enjoyed. Mouthwashing has that same style of like, it's kind of like an old school kind of PS2 or PS1 graphic style. Probably more PS1 graphic style really. Which also adds to the anxious feeling you kind of get while playing it, because PS1 style games, going back to them, even like the most genuine and happy games can sometimes feel a bit cursed just because of how the graphics look. It's a very odd time period for video games, but obviously a very important one. So there you go. As for games that I played this week that I have been playing, I finally finished Mario and Luigi Brothership, and I say finally because I was ready for that game to end about 10 hours before it ended. They really dragged their feet with this one. I mean, even though I wouldn't take out like everything in like the 10, like I think I played like 32 or 33 hours of the game, and I felt like there was a lot of times that the game was just wasting my time essentially. There were story beats and side missions and dialogue that just really was, they just yammered on and on and on, or it just wasn't important information, or like the side mission was a very basic, like, oh, take this letter to this island and then go to this island and tell the person this, and you got an award. And I was like, oh, I started not doing side missions as I got farther through, but in the end I was like, well, I need the XP, I need the bonuses that they give you, like at least the cell, if anything, because it does get very. I mean, it's an RPG turn-based combat game. Mario and Luigi games are kind of notorious, and even Mario RPG, they're kind of notorious for amping up the difficulty towards the end, and I didn't want to get stuck on the final boss because I hadn't leveled up enough. That kind of happened with Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door. Like I was leveling up, sure, but by the time I got to the last boss, I hadn't like upgraded my battle points enough, or I hadn't upgraded my health enough, or something like that. So I wanted to make sure that I didn't have that experience, because I wanted it to be a bit of a more smoother sailing thing. So I did drag my feet through various side missions and stuff like that and also fought many, many, many battles in order to get myself to the level that I needed to be. And the game does warn you if you're going into oh, you're going to face this. You can talk to some character and they're like, hey, you might want to level up a little bit more before doing this one, right? So they do kind of nudge you, like, hey, you might want to level up a little bit more. But then again, like, I don't think the game was tough enough to, like, even if you go into a battle a little bit underpowered, you should be able to weasel your way through, especially for the boss fights, because a lot of the boss fights kind of go the same way, where it's like, okay, you beat them up a little bit and you have to dodge a couple of their attacks, but eventually Luigi's like, oh, I have an idea. And then you do something with Luigi, and that gives them, like, every hit that they take is now critical damage for like a turn or two. And so that's when you do like your BP attacks, where it's like, oh, red shell, green shell, or oh, pendulum tipping scale, or oh, spring hat, or whatever. Things that do a lot of damage, right? You don't want to use the ones that are like for a group of enemies if it's a boss fight, because you want to make sure it's pinpointed to the boss, but everything is pretty much effective at that time when they're in the critical health. And it lasted all the way up until the final boss too, where Luigi would be like, I have an idea, and then you just kind of wail on the boss for a turn or two, and then you go back to doing your normal thing. But that's not to say that the final boss was easy. It was a pretty tough boss fight at the end of the day, especially because the timing of the jumping and using your hammer can be very, very strict at times. Even though it's mostly kind of loosey-goosey, like as long as you know what attack the enemy's doing, you should be able to fumble your way through it. But some of the enemies and bosses in the game have very quick attacks that are difficult to predict. Especially there's like these birds that have clamps for mouths. Those ones seem to be the most difficult for me to dodge around, because they have such weird attack patterns. Everything else is kind of like, okay, you can do this. It wasn't until a little bit more than halfway through the game that Bowser and his minions showed up, which I was kind of like, wow, we're really waiting this long, huh? And even like, it was a nice change of pace, but it wasn't really like anything that I would really say like, oh, it made the game 100% better. Like I was actually having a pretty decent time fighting against the unique enemies in the game itself. I like the designs of a lot of the enemies. I think the enemy design is very good, and also the enemy variety is very good too. There's really not much that I would complain about with the enemy variety. Like, sure, there's a couple times where you go to a new island and it's just like, oh, it's the same enemy, but they're blue instead of orange or whatever. And they have like maybe one or two extra moves attached to them, or maybe they're a little bit faster, or they have a bit more health. I don't know. Or they heal the friendlies around them. But I did find that the enemy variety throughout the entire game was pretty good. I mean, I can't complain about that. If there's one thing to say about the game, is the enemy variety was stellar, and they did a great job with that. The thing that I did not like about the game was how long-winded it was. I felt like there was just endless dialogue of the characters saying nothing at times. And yes, I read through pretty much all the dialogue. I did not skip through dialogue just in case, because you never know. But for the most part, it was just like they one of the most egregious things was, so Princess Peach joins like this group of kids, and they go off on their own adventure for a little while, and every time that Princess Peach reappears in the game, they have to explain, like, oh, Princess Peach went off with Idol is the group's name. She went off with Idol, and she did this, and Princess Peach joined them, and so did the character from the other Mario and Luigi games, that Starry kind of character. And oh, like, she did this, and she's a part of Idol. Don't forget that she's a part of Idol. There's also several moments in the game where it's like, do you need me to re-explain this? And it's like, and you say no, and then the character just explains it anyway, but maybe a bit shorter. And I was just like, what are we doing? Like, I said, no, do not explain this again. And the character just decided to just spout off the exposition again. And there's so many times where, like, the same cutscene plays, or the same idea for a cutscene plays, where it's like, oh, the character is watering this, or the character is doing this. I also felt like the game needed a bit more expression as well, because by the end of the game, Mario and Luigi, essentially throughout the entire game, when they're talking, they have the same animation. When they talk to each other, they kind of do the same thing where they say each other's name, Luigi, Mario, and then they jump up and down like twice. And it's like, oh my God, can we just get them to do something different for once? Jesus Christ. So the game started off being very fun, and I was really enjoying my time with it. But it ended on like, wow, I am just becoming more and more annoyed with this game. Like, even though it was still good towards the end, I was getting more and more annoyed because it was just kind of wasting my time, and I hate games that waste my time. And I know this year I haven't been playing a lot of longer games. This one was probably one of the longer ones that I played, next to the games that I was playing at the beginning of the year, like Armored Core and Final Fantasy and Shadow of the Erdtree. But it just really felt like a drag. And for a game to be as long as this one is, it's really got to grip me. It's really got to have something that really makes me want to play more. And much like Rise of the Ronin, it overstayed its welcome. Mario and Luigi Brothership just kind of like kept going and going and going, and it wasn't doing anything super interesting. Like, yeah, I liked the island that was half lava, half ice, but where have I seen that before? And sure, there was a couple of puzzles in there that I thought were pretty good, all things considered, but for the most part, by the time that I was more than halfway through the game, I was more than ready for it to be done, but the game kind of just kept going, and it kept talking to you, and it kept just giving you these really boring side quests to do. And not all the side quests were boring, of course, but most of them kind of ended up being the same thing, where it's like, okay, go here, talk to this person, go here, talk to this person, maybe battle an enemy or two, and then you're done. And I was just kind of like, okay, we really should have done a bit more with this, right? So yeah, that's Mario and Luigi Brothership. I ended up giving it a 3.5 out of 5. The music's great. The enemy variety is really good. Most of the story is fine. And the battling is fun, but it just becomes quite the drag as you go through the game. It loses a bit of its charm. It loses a bit of its luster, as it just kind of keeps retreading the same ground. And the side missions were not a good mix-up for the game. And even though the bosses were good, they kind of went the same way, where you fight them for a little bit, and then Luigi gives them their double damage kind of thing going on, and then that's that. So, like I said, enjoyable for the most part, but a little bit too long. A little bit too long for its own good. And like I said, I don't mind a longer game, and I know I've been playing shorter games this year, but there really hasn't been a longer game besides from Shadow of the Erdtree that's really made me want to play the whole thing, right? But I also haven't played a lot of like the longer games that came out this year either, so I can't really speak on that, but yeah, whatever. All right, let's talk about some games that we streamed and beat this past week. We're doing our December 64 month, where I'm only playing Nintendo 64 games. And right now, we've beaten 3 games in 3 days, which is kind of crazy. I was not expecting to beat these games in such a short time. But I also guess I also didn't realize that Nintendo 64 games were a bit shorter than I remember them being. When you're a kid, obviously you're not as good at playing games, so it took me longer to get through some of these. But so we started off the month with Vigilante 8. I have been dying to replay this game since I got it. I got the N64 version earlier, I think it was like late last year, and I've just been kind of like wanting to play it, but I haven't gotten around to it. So I finally got around to it for the start of this month, and it holds up pretty well. It's a very fun experience. You know, obviously it's related to like Twisted Metal, but you know, not Twisted Metal. I've always liked Vigilante 8 better than Twisted Metal, and it's probably because I played Vigilante 8 first, sure. But I've always liked how the presentation of Vigilante 8 is and how the game works. I've always enjoyed that more than Twisted Metal. Even though I like Twisted Metal, that's not to say I don't like it. I just like Vigilante 8 more. And, you know, playing through the game, it was still a great time. The car battles were fun. Getting the special abilities for each character was fun. And going through, like, their story mode was fun. The problem is at the end of the story mode, there's supposed to be, like, this really fun, like, ending to most of the characters. And a lot of them were just kind of like basic, like not worth it kind of endings. There were a couple that were really fun, like Loki steals a UFO and he crashes it, or Beeswax gets blown up by a nuke because his bees attach itself to a yellow warhead and it just kind of blows up. But then there's a bunch of other ones that's like, you know, Mo, he got his money, but his car broke down, so he has to walk into the desert. Or it's Convoy, and he picks up Houston 3, and they drive off into the distance. And and look, it's his niece Sheila. Let's pick her up. You know, it's like there's a bunch of those like endings to stories that just like are kind of lame. And even though it's not a big part of the game, it is just something that I was like, I remember them being a bit more entertaining when I was a kid, but obviously, you know, they aren't. I think Second Offensive does a better job with that, but we'd have to play that to find out. Also, there's some weird physics in the game, obviously. You know, sometimes your car will just kind of like fly into the air when you're like near like an edge of the map or like a steep hill for whatever reason. So that's also kind of like a detriment to the game as well. But more positively, the soundtrack, still amazing. Love the soundtrack in this game. I think I've already had the main theme as a song of the day for the podcast, but you know, it's just one of those soundtracks. It's classic. It's 80s coded. It's so fun. It's bumping. You know, love that a lot. I like the design of the cars and the characters themselves. I think they did a good job with making them all unique and stand out. I think each one has a really nice special ability that's pretty good for their vehicles. Some of them aren't as good as others, but you know, I think the special abilities are a nice game changer. I like all the different modes that it has in the game, even though there's not a lot, but you can do the arcade mode, you can do the story mode, you can do the survivor mode. I used to play the survivor mode a lot back in the day. I really enjoyed the survivor mode for that, for Vigilante 8. I used to use Dave and his van with the UFOs. It was a lot of fun. And then also, you know, the graphics in the game, not too bad. I like the environments. I like the designs of the cars, like I said. I also like that they, you know, get beat up as you shoot them. You know, they continuously degrade in quality as you go through. And there's a lot of destructible environments as well in the game, too, which is fun. Especially the oil field. That one probably has the most destructible things that are the most fun to destroy. The map sizes are also pretty nice, too. Even though you're playing a lot of the same maps over and over again, they do have a lot of area to cover. So sometimes if you're playing Ghost Town, you might not even go to the ghost town. You might just go around the dunes where the tornadoes are. But then, you know, eventually it's like, oh, the next time I'm playing it, oh, we're battling in the town this time. So there's a lot of, it's a nice large area to explore and fight in. And sometimes you don't even touch some areas in these maps, which is very cool. The secret character in the game, Y the Alien, is amazing. It's probably one of the reasons why I loved the experience so much, is because it's just such a bizarre and crazy kind of character to add to the game. His UFO is really overpowered, and his ultimate ability is obviously very, very good. The fun thing about his story is because he's not a vigilante or a coyote, the two dueling factions in the game, he kind of has objectives for both like protect and destroy at times. So very fun. He's also got a couple new maps to play with when you use his character, and then at the end of it all, you get the ultimate bonus level, which is like a fairy tale land with a castle and stuff like that. So very fun to go through. I've really enjoyed my time with it. The game's just a little bit short, I guess. That's really it. I mean, I would put this at the S in the S tier. Objectively, it is a 4 out of 5. Like I know that, but I love this game so much that I have to put it higher in my tier list, even though I know that's like a 4 out of 5 and probably should be A or B tier. But I'm gonna put it in S tier. You know, it's my list. It's my tier list, and it's my games. And this is still Vigilante is still one of my favorite games of all time. The story behind it is it was my first T-rated game ever. It's the first game I ever played that was rated T. And I went to I think it was Hollywood Video to buy the game, which is kind of crazy because there's obviously a surplus when you're buying games from something like that, a rental store. But that's where I bought the game. And the funny thing is when I went to buy, I bought Vigilante 8 Second Offensive from a Blockbuster. So I bought both the games in the series from 2 different rental stores. But yeah, I love Vigilante 8. I think it's a great experience, and I would gladly play it again over and over and over. Another game we played was Beetle Adventure Racing. This is obviously a game based around the Volkswagen Beetle. It came out on the N64. I think, obviously a lot of people think this is like an underrated racing game. I kind of agree. Like, yeah, it is a bit of a underrated racing game, sure. But I also don't think that it's amazing. I think that it's like a pretty average racing game with some fun stuff mixed in there. I think the level designs, like the racetrack designs, are nice. The problem is that when you're doing like the novice circuit or the amateur circuit or whatever, you have to replay a bunch of maps from the previous circuit. So when you do the novice circuit, it's like, oh, here's 4 new levels. Love that. But then you go up to like the intermediate circuit. It's like, okay, you play those same 4 levels, and then you play the 1 new map. And then you go and play the next one, which is like the expert mode or advanced. And it's like, okay, you play all 5 of those maps you just played, and then you do 1 new map, and you play the next one, which is like the expert round. And it's like, okay, you play all the original 6 maps that you just played, and then 1 extra one. It's just like, it just got very, very taxing towards the end because you were just replaying the same maps over and over and over again with only 1 new map at the end of it all. And then you could also get screwed by that map because you don't know it as well as the other maps. So, you could lose the tournament just because you don't know the map too well. So that's like the main thing about the game that kind of bugged me, was the fact that you had to keep replaying these maps over and over and over again through the tournament mode. And I do think that they could have done a bit more to mix it up a little bit. For a Volkswagen branded game, it's not bad by any means, but it's not one that I think that I'll be going back to anytime soon. Yes, the soundtrack was fun. Yes, I like the design of the racetracks themselves. Yes, I thought that choosing the different colored Beetles was kind of a fun idea instead of like making them look different in terms of like oh, here's a bunch of different Volkswagens. Well, here's a Beetle. And the blue one goes faster than the red one. I think it's goofy, and I love the announcer in the game. The announcer's been ingrained in my head. With all the different things that I used to say. And yes, the multiplayer mode was also fun back in the day. Did not get to play that right now. But at the end of the day, I think I gave it like a 3.5, and I'm going to give it a B tier. It's still worth playing for sure, especially because it's a more cheap game anyway. But I mean, it's not like, yeah, but I don't think that I would like be like, oh, you have to play this racing game. It's so good. Like maybe for pod racing, I would say that, but for Beetle Adventure Racing, not so much. Not so much. But at the end of the day, I'll probably give it a B tier, maybe even a C tier, but probably a B tier, and we'll go from there. And then finally, for the games that I played on stream this week, there's a game called Sins and Punishment, which was recommended that I play. And I went into this thinking that I was really going to enjoy this. It's an N64 game that was like a Japanese release, but it has English voice acting for whatever reason. And it's essentially an on-rails shooter, kind of like the old Sega arcade games where you're just kind of like a character flying towards an enemy and you can shoot all the bullets in the world at them. It was a bit more grounded, of course, in that way where you're kind of like going through environments, like running through environments and stuff like that. There was one section that I really, really enjoyed in the game, and it was a section where you were flying around the battleships, and you were destroying the battleships and fighting the enemies. The rest of the game, not so much. Like, yeah, I liked the ending boss, too, but the rest of the game was just kind of, like, very bizarre, very weird. I wasn't, like, into it either. which like I love my bizarre games. I mean, I've mentioned it a couple times on this podcast, but Arctic Eggs, a very bizarre game, a very enjoyable game. Okay, I like my bizarre games, but this one takes the cake for just absurd, like non-cohesive storytelling, and it just didn't mesh with me. I thought that the cutscenes didn't explain anything at all. Things just kind of happened, and then you're fighting bugs or you're fighting jet fighters or whatever. And there were some boss fights in there that I thought were very annoying as well. And also the tutorial didn't really prepare you for the game. Like it didn't tell you that the sword attack was also a parry move. Like I feel like that's a pretty important thing to disclose in this type of thing. So, yeah, I mean, I know that I'll catch some flack for this, but I didn't like it, and I gave it a D tier. I was not very into it, but I did like that final boss fight. The final boss fight was pretty epic. You essentially were fighting a fake Earth, and it was shooting like asteroids and missiles at real Earth. So it's kind of like that missile defense game from back in the day where you needed to destroy the objects that were coming to Earth, but also shoot the other Earth to destroy that Earth. So I thought that was a pretty fun final boss fight, and I was hoping there was more to the game because I was like, oh, that was good. It's starting to get good now, and the game ended. I was like, oh, okay. And of course, that section where you're flying around the battleships, the U.S. battleships, was a good section. I liked the idea. I think in practicality, though, just in execution, it kind of fumbled it a little bit throughout the entire game, but that section was at least decent. So, like I said, I'll probably catch some flack for this, but it's my personal experience with it, and I just didn't enjoy it. Sorry. All right, let's move on to what's in the news. All right, I figured I'd start off with something fun because it's that time of year and the rewinds are abound. So you can actually check out your Xbox year in review right now on the Xbox.com. Xbox.com, not on. Xbox.com, year in review. And this one was released on the 4th of December, so it's a bit earlier than the other year in review stuff, but it's still pretty fun to go through these things. So my Xbox year in review, my number one game was Call of Duty, of course, and more specifically Black Ops 6. This year, I played a total of 257 hours of games on Xbox apps. I played 17 games. My preferred platform was PC, and I earned 240 achievements and 6,125 gamer score. My busiest month was, of course, November when Black Ops came out, and I had 5 hours of playtime on console and 252 hours on PC, less than a minute on mobile and cloud. 77% of my gaming this year was for shooters, 20% was action adventure, 2% strategy, 1% puzzle and trivia. And I scored in the top 15% of players' playtime, 2% of players' gamer score, and 2% of players' achievements. Pretty good. Obviously, my number one game was Call of Duty with 166 hours played, 560 gamer score achieved, 25 achievements earned, and my rarest achievement for the game is Heavy Ordnance Specialist. I'm in the top 15% of players active on this game. My number two game was Halo Master Chief Collection. I played 32 hours of this because we played like 4 games from the collection this year. Halo 1, 3, ODST, and Reach. No, we played Reach last year, I think. So, yeah, we played 3 games, which totaled to 32 hours. Earned 610 gamer score for that and 64 achievements. And then my number 3 top game was Another Crab's Treasure, of course. I played 17 hours of that. I earned all the gamer score for it, 100%. And I earned 32 achievements, all the achievements. And I was in the top 10% of most active players for the game. I mean, when they do a New Game Plus, I may go through the game again. But Another Crab's Treasure was like a good one-and-done type thing for me. I think that was a great experience, but I don't know if I'd want to play again, at least recent, like now, like maybe in a couple of years. Other games that I played, I've talked about on the podcast, obviously, Harold Halibut, Still Wicks of Deep, Senua's Saga, Hellblade 2, Flock, Little Kitty, Big City, etc., etc. I'm surprised that Flock wasn't higher on here because I felt like I spent more time in that than Harold Halibut or Still Wicks of Deep, but whatever. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I think that's always a fun little thing to check out, especially the Xbox One is pretty fun. But the PlayStation One is the one that I know is going to have a lot more going on for me personally. And the PlayStation wrap up will be available on December 10th. So they revealed on their website that it will be coming December 10th, 2024. Much like last year, it's going to show all the different things that you did during the year from different various platforms. So that'll be pretty fun to check out, especially because I play on so many different platforms for PlayStation. Not only do I play on PS3, but also on the VR2, and the PS5, and now the Portal. So I'm sure that there's going to be a nice diverse group of things in there. So it'd be fun to check that out. I always love seeing like the monthly breakdowns too for the PlayStation wrap up. But yeah, that's coming December 10th. The funny thing about my Spotify Wrapped is that two soundtracks from video games appeared in there, the Cult of the Lamb and the Bugsnax soundtrack. And that's because when I'm recording this podcast, I'm listening to usually those two soundtracks on Spotify, which is something new that I did this year because I was kind of like tired of YouTube ads like messing up my vibe. But that also messed up my Spotify Wrapped. So instead of it being like my top 5 actual artists, it's like, here's your top 3 plus 2 artists that are ones that you listen to while you're recording the podcast. So even though, like, yeah, I enjoyed those, I really enjoy those two video game soundtracks, obviously. They definitely I wouldn't put them in my top 5 artists of the year. If you wanted to know, Knocked Loose, Deftones, 4 Years Strong, Junk Buddy, and Idola are my top 5 artists this year, in my opinion. So there you go. If you're interested in that or not, I don't care. I just wanted to say that. So, all right. The first news of the day: Foamstars is ending support in January for the game. So that means that there will be no more updates and seasons. The final season is called The Party Goes On, which will begin December 13th and will last until January 17th. After that, there will be no more updates for the game, including seasonal updates, although the game will still remain online. It is not being completely shut down yet. My prediction, because I've been pretty good with these predictions lately, my prediction is after like February, maybe even into March, the game will officially shut down fully. That is my prediction. I don't think that there's enough of a player base on it even now after with this final season. Obviously, it had probably the most players the first week that it was available on PlayStation Plus. I know that for a fact because me, Callus, and Greedy all played that first week, and then 2 of those people dropped off by the 3rd week, And I played a little bit more, but really I only did that to finish up the story mode for the game, which wasn't really that amazing. But at least if the game does get fully shut down, like in terms of online servers, there are still those offline modes. I don't even know. They could probably change them to being offline modes where it's just like a wave defender mode, which was fine. It just wasn't really that interesting to do. So I was thinking of before the game fully shuts down, maybe going for the 100% in the game. But then again, I don't really want to play more Foamstars this year. I think I played enough as it is. It's nice that the game isn't being totally shut down fully right now, but I do predict that in the future, in the near future, it probably will bite the dust. Yeah, it was a good idea for them to bring the game to being free to play. Like that was a good idea, but I think it was a little bit too late. I think it should have started free to play. It probably should have launched on all platforms free to play right off the bat. But they had like some sort of contract with PlayStation Plus, I guess, which kind of messed that up. But even then, I think the writing was on the wall for this kind of dying out pretty early on, just based off of the PlayStation Plus numbers. Because I do know for a fact that by the time that like week 4 came around that the game was available, no one was playing it. Like you could barely find people to play the game with. So it's unfortunate, but it is what it is. In similar news, XDefiant, the Ubisoft free-to-play first-person shooter that came out earlier this year, is going to be going offline next year. And right now, you can't even download the game and create a new account to play the game anymore. They are not accepting any new players, which is kind of crazy. The servers are not going to go offline until the 3rd of June. So you still have plenty of time to play the game if you so desire. It's just kind of crazy to me that you're not able to make a new account and play the game. You can't play the game if you don't have an account already right now as of this podcast recording. So the main thing about this, though, is that they're going to be refunding players all their money that they spent on the game, including people who bought the Ultimate Founders Pack and the Gold Pack and Starter Pack DLC bundles, along with any virtual currency that they bought to buy things in the game. What they will refund all those purchases through Steam, PlayStation Store, Xbox Store, etc. Right now, it's confirmed that 277 people will lose their jobs once the game gets shut down. A good portion of those people are going to be sent to other studios to work on other projects, but that is still a pretty big chunk of people losing their jobs there. In a statement on Twitter, Mark Rubin, who is the community executive producer for the game, said, "Free-to-play in particular is a long journey. Many free-to-play games take a long time to find their footing and become profitable. It's a long journey that Ubisoft and the teams working on the game were prepared to make until very recently. But unfortunately, the journey became too much to sensibly continue." So, as I said, back when the game first launched and it had its first bit of controversy, I knew that this game was going to be dead by the time that Black Ops 6 came out. And I was right. I don't think the numbers for the game are very high at all now that Call of Duty came out. I knew that Call of Duty was going to kill this game. I didn't know that they were going to shut it down, per se, once after Call of Duty came out. But I knew that this game was going to lose a big amount of its fan base or player base simply because Call of Duty, big game, XDefiant, new game that feels like an old game. And that was my main complaint about it, was it felt like the worst Call of Duty. Black Ops 4 is not a great Call of Duty, no matter which way you slice it. And it felt like that game. And that's kind of where I was like, okay, I'll play a couple rounds and maybe I'll play a couple days, but I'm not going to play too much more of this. And yeah, I deleted it pretty quickly off of my PlayStation once I was kind of like, okay, I feel like I've done enough to claim that I've beaten the game, right? And I think the other thing too was it's such a departure from the other Tom Clancy things. They even took the Tom Clancy name off this game because it was so different. And I think a lot of people also, that rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. Oh, why are we removing Tom Clancy from this game? You have Tom Clancy's name on that Extraction game that came out earlier this year or last year. Why not on XDefiant? And I think it's because it's more of a comedic take on the first-person shooter genre in a lot of ways, and that's not a normal thing for Tom Clancy. But that being said, it was not unpredictable. It was predictable that this game was going to be shut down. It's staying around for a little bit longer, but if you don't have an account already, then you can't even check it out in its dying days. So yeah, I think the main thing was, one, not enough weapon variety in the game. Two, the guns felt very stiff, like any free-to-play shooter. The one that I like to think back to in comparison is that Warface game that came out on PS4, because the guns had no kickback to them. They were very stiff when you shot them. Nothing really felt good about that game. And I kind of had the same thing here, which is ironically very similar to Black Ops 4. So yeah, it was just one of those games that it really felt like a free to play shooter. Even though it was coming from a big developer like Ubisoft, it still felt very, very free to play coded. So it's unfortunate, but it is what it is. All right, remember last week how I was talking about the 30th anniversary of PlayStation and who knows what they're going to do and blah, blah, blah. And Bloodborne, it's getting servers maintenance on the same day as the 30th anniversary. Wow, what's going to happen? Well, as I predicted, nothing happened. And actually less than nothing happened in terms of PlayStation stuff. They didn't even have a state of play. They announced a couple things, but it wasn't anything big. So what PlayStation did was they released the PlayStation 30th anniversary thank you trailer, where they just kind of showed a bunch of different games from their history, popular games from the various platforms, games that obviously aren't around anymore, but they're still in our hearts, like Ape Escape and stuff like that. It's nice that they are still acknowledging a lot of these games, but it also is it's kind of like a little stab in the back, oh, well, here's Ape Escape, but you're never getting an Ape Escape again, baby. Or maybe we will in the future. I don't know. The future's not set in stone. But yeah, I thought that it was a fine little homage to the 30th anniversary of PlayStation, but I also didn't feel like it was really it wasn't really anything at all. They didn't really even have a reveal. I think that they kind of blew their wad a bit early with the release, or the early reveal that Sly Cooper 2 and 3 were coming to the PlayStation service, and Jack and Daxter. I think they should have done that at like the end of this little trailer thing that they have cooking here. Also, they announced like a free-to-play or demo of Gran Turismo, called My First Gran Turismo, which I feel like they could have announced at the end of this as well. Like they could have had a little like mini, like, and here's the things you can expect from, you know, our 30th anniversary. And they go boom, 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 Sly Cooper, Gran Turismo, blah, blah, blah. But they didn't do that. And I feel like it's kind of a dud kind of thing to just have like this cool trailer, sure, but really ultimately nothing of worth is in here other than like, oh hey, I remember that game, or oh hey, I remember this character, or oh hey, look, it's Jin Saki, or oh hey, look, it's Destiny, or oh look, it's Final Fantasy VII and Tomb Raider and MLB The Show and Katamari and Killzone. Like, you know, there's a lot of different like fun things to see in here, but then again, it's just a trailer. Like they're not even showing anything off, so a bit disappointing for the 30th anniversary. But I don't think, I mean, in order to be disappointed, you had to have expectations in the first place, and I didn't really have any expectations for this year anyway. So there you go. Also in PlayStation news, the PSVR 2 has been seen in the wild having hand tracking. Lucy posted this on the Discord, and I thought that it was pretty interesting. So essentially, there's like these little kiosks in Japan, and I think around America too, where you can play a washing game where you use your pointer fingers to shoot water jets and clean things, and you also use your hands to like explode dirt or whatever off of the characters, I guess. But it's a fun little demo, I guess. I mean, there's some short videos footage of the people playing it. And essentially how this works is the PlayStation VR 2 has 4 cameras on the outside, right? And it uses those cameras to track your phalanges. And essentially it knows when you're doing like an OK sign or a pointer sign or a fist, you know. And I thought that was pretty cool. I think that they're using that hand tracking technology pretty well here. Hopefully that means that we will be getting full support for this in the future. I like the idea of the controller-less control. I know that the Xbox Kinect did that so long ago, but obviously that was very rudimentary and it didn't really work too well. Obviously with this, I think it's going to be a bit more accurate simply because you have the cameras on the controller or on the headset tracking your movement. Someone did take a picture of the information on the kiosk. It's a little bit hard to read, but it says, overview tracks the position and posture of the PlayStation VR 2 user's hands. The library is available while something PlayStation 5. No additional devices required. Recognition at 60 FPS with low latency and displays the hands simultaneously. Information provided. 12 types of gestures detection. Hand scale and hand mesh. I can't read the other one. But yeah, I mean, you know, it seems like they're doing some interesting stuff here. Obviously, there's been hand tracking for a little while now, but this would be the first time for a PlayStation headset to have hand tracking, which would be kind of fun. And hopefully that means maybe we'll have like an Astrobot game dedicated to the hand tracking motion, which would be kind of fun. I'm still waiting for a VR Astrobot game. Like I get it, like you just put out Astrobot, but like PSVR 2 was primed and ready for something else, PlayStation first party. But all we got was that Horizon game, and sure, we've gotten other games that are decently good, obviously, but for the most part, the PSVR 2 library is kind of a bit disappointing at this moment, and it would be nice to see them put out more experiences that are first party. And really give you something worthwhile to play on the PSVR 2. Like, even though there are things to play, obviously, like I said, but it's one of those things where it's like, but where's my first party PlayStation games? There's really not too many out there for the VR 2. And even the PSVR 1 didn't really have a lot of support from PlayStation itself, but it still had a couple of first party games in there that worked really well. So it'd be unfortunate if they were not developing a game for the system right now. But we'll have to wait and see. And I mean, obviously they have plans to keep utilizing the PSVR 2 for the future. Like, obviously they wouldn't be doing the hand tracking stuff if they weren't planning on doing something with it. But we'll have to wait and see. All right, Pokemon TV is making its grand return with an official YouTube channel for it. I believe the Pokemon TV app was closed down earlier this year, and now they released a YouTube channel with some episodes on it so far. For some reason, the episodes aren't in order, which is kind of weird. But they're planning on doing live streams and uploading various episodes to the channel throughout the history of Pokemon. So as of the closure from Pokemon TV, as of December 6th, they're going to start uploading various episodes, live streams, and compilations from the anime series. Yu-Gi-Oh! Kind of did a similar thing, but on Twitch, where they do a constant live stream of every single episode ever in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Franchise. So it starts with, Duelist Kingdom, and then it goes all the way through, 5Ds, which is the latest stuff. And it's been fun to kind of, tune in every so often to see where it's at. It's in Generation X. That's fun, to watch some stuff with Jaden, or they're doing the Duelist City, the God cards being first introduced. Or hey, we're in the motorcycle era where they're riding around motorcycles, which is kind of crazy, but still kind of fun to watch. Obviously, I'm obviously more of a fan of Yu-Gi-Oh! Than Pokemon, but it's still cool to see that they are gonna keep the older series alive and probably upload up until the newest stuff. But they'll see what they decide to do. I think the idea of doing a Pokemon live stream of the first episode all the way through the latest episode would be a good idea. It's very popular with the Yu-Gi-Oh! Right now. Let me check the numbers just as a reference here. Right now, the Yu-Gi-Oh! Twitch channel has 911 people watching right now. It's pretty consistently around that 800 to 900 mark for the most part. It sometimes will dip down to the 200s when it's a weekday, but yeah, right now they are on Yu-Gi-Oh! Arc V, episode 307, an academic test. And I think it's fun. It kind of reminds me of that Saturday morning, wake up and watch Cartoon Network kind of thing, where you kind of just tune in and you're they're playing, they're doing the Dungeon Dice Monsters episode. I can't wait to watch this again. It kind of reminds me of that, and I think that it's a pretty fun thing for these companies to be doing this. So, yeah, as we wait for the next Pokemon game and obviously the next Yu-Gi-Oh! Game, you can actually watch full episodes of Pokemon on the Pokemon TV YouTube channel, available now. Okay, the 30 games that are nominated for the community vote have been revealed for the Game Awards, and they are Astrobot, Balatro, Black Myth Wukong, Call of Duty Black Ops 6, Dragon Age The Veilguard, Dragon Ball Sparking Zero, Dragon's Dogma 2, Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, Final Fantasy 14, Fortnite, Genshin Impact, Helldivers 2, League of Legends, The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom, Like a Dragon, Infinite Wealth, Metaphor Refantasio, Mobile Legends Bang Bang, No Man's Sky, Pal World, Persona 3 Reload, Senua's Saga Hellblade 2, Silent Hill 2, Sonic X Generations, Stellar Blade, Valorant, Warframe, Warhammer 40k, Space Marine 2, Wuthering Waves, and Zenless Zone 0 are all available to vote on. Right now, we're in the second round of voting, so most of those games, probably more like half of those games have already been eliminated from contention, but it's still pretty cool that they do this, I guess, as opposed to the big corporations voting on things. It's the community voting on things here. So if you want to check that out, you can go over to the Game Awards website, and there's a section for voting on the community vote. All right, a bunch of NASCAR games are going to be delisted from the various platforms that they are on the 31st of December. People are suspecting that it's because the IP for NASCAR is being transferred from Motorsport Games to iRacing. NASCAR has had actually pretty long a tenure with video games, starting all the way back in the PS1 and N64 era and moving all the way to nowadays. So it's been a pretty long-running series. I don't think Motorsport Games has been in control of the series throughout the entire franchise, but at least the newest stuff from this generation and last generation have been all Motorsport Games. So in a Twitter post, they said, from December 31st, all NASCAR games and their DLC content will no longer be available for purchase on all digital storefronts, but will remain available to play after that time. This includes NASCAR Heat, NASCAR Rivals, and NASCAR Ignition franchises. Please look out for various platform promotions this December to complete your NASCAR console game collection. We sincerely thank our community for the enthusiasm and support you've shown games over the years and hope you enjoy racing with us. So it seems like they might come back after the licenses transferred over. I'm not sure, but it seems like also they're planning on doing some sales before it's completely done too. Probably like $5 per game, I would say. So if you're a fan of NASCAR, haven't played a NASCAR game recently, this might be your time to pick it up. I'm not a huge fan of NASCAR, but I really haven't really played a NASCAR game. The closest I got was playing a NASCAR game was that NASCAR arcade game, Arcade Rush, that came out last year, which wasn't like good, but it also wasn't bad, you know. We'll see what happens with this in the future. But as of right now, these games are being delisted. And finally, for the news today, a Xbox Series S saved a person's life. So what happened was the person was riding their bike home from buying the Xbox Series S from like Best Buy or something like that, and they got trapped underneath a truck. Essentially what happened is the truck didn't see them. Their bike got destroyed, by the way, and they were kind of like holding onto the bumper, but the person who was driving the truck did not see them. Eventually they got sucked under the truck, and luckily they were wearing their backpack with the Xbox Series S in it. It scraped up the backpack and the box and the console itself, but it saved them from getting major injuries. So pretty cool story there. Xbox eventually reached out to this person who posted this on Reddit, and they said that they would be happy to send them a new Xbox. I'm guessing they'll send them an Xbox Series X, but maybe if the person wants another S, they will go with an S. But yeah, I'm glad that this person's okay. Their name was Jonesy8828 or 2282. On Twitter, they're 8828, and on Reddit, they're 2282. So who knows why that is, but yeah, luckily they are safe, and their console's a bit scratched up, but it actually still works. The controller, not so much. It got too damaged. The joysticks actually got torn off. But the Xbox console itself, it's a bit scraped up and cracked, but it does turn on, which is kind of impressive. So, very harrowing experience, but I'm glad that they are okay. And I'm glad that Xbox reached out to them, and they're going to do something for them. I think that's pretty fun, pretty cool. All right, let's move on to the final part of the show, which is what's coming soon. All right, Tales of Iron 2, Whiskers of Winter, is getting released earlier than we expected. So the previous window was February, but now officially they revealed that Tales of Iron 2 is coming out the 28th of January, so right at the end of the first month of the year. I'm very excited to try this out. I obviously loved Tales of Iron 1. I thought it was a great game, a good mesh of like 2D beat 'em up / Souls-like mechanics. Even if you're not a fan of Souls-like games, I think you might like that one. But Tales of Iron 2, Whiskers of Winter, if I remember correctly, it takes place in a different land after the events of Tales of Iron 1, and you essentially play as like a Viking kind of rat people. But yeah, very excited for this. I'm glad that it's coming out sooner rather than later. Obviously, if they needed more time, I wouldn't mind if they took more time, but I'm excited to try this out. So Tales of Iron 2, Whiskers of Winter, coming out January 28th. And we also got a release date for Wanderstop, which is the new game coming from the Stanley Parable developer, Davey Redden. We'll see what this is all about when it comes out on the 11th of March. They released a new trailer, kind of going into a bit of a deep dive on the game. Maybe not even a deep dive, but just an overview of the game. Had a bit of an interview with David himself. They showed off a bit of the game. It's obviously a crafting game where you also make tea for people, so you gather resources and make tea. And as usual with a game like this, there's something else going on in the background, especially a game from the same person as Stanley Parable. You know there's going to be something else going on in the background. But Wanderstop officially coming out 11th of March, 2025, and we'll wait to see more about that in the future. A game called Spine is coming out next year, and it got a new trailer on the Spine YouTube channel. Essentially what this game is, it's a Sifu type game, but with guns. So you use like a combination of martial arts and gun fu to beat up and kill enemies. Obviously, there's like little special abilities you can use as well. The game looks pretty good, pretty slick. The only thing that I'm concerned about is how
slick the game looks, it's hard to say like, oh, is that a cutscene or is it a actual combo that the person is doing, or maybe it's just manipulation of the camera. It's hard to say until you actually get your hands on it. Obviously, the game does look good though. I do like the style. I think that the game has a nice rhythm to it. It looks like, but once again, if it's more like flash over substance, it might be a bit that might be a bit unfortunate. But yeah, apparently the game will be coming out in 2025 now. It was going to be coming out in 2024, but they delayed it a little bit. We don't have an exact release date for it just yet, but I'm sure it'll come out sometime in 2025. Speaking of delays, Croc, Legend of the Gobos was delayed. The game is now coming out in early 2025, which I kind of predicted. Well, not really predicted, but kind of thought that was going to happen because we weren't really hearing much about it. Like, yeah, sure, you got the physical edition pre-order and whatnot, but it still said, 2024. And when you get to the end of November, it's like, okay, is it really going to come out in 2024? So it did end up coming. It is going to end up coming out in early 2025. In a message from Argonaut Games, they said, "We understand that after 27 years of waiting, this news might be a little disappointing, especially with the festive season coming soon. However, our goal has always been to deliver a game with high quality and polish that will truly delight. We appreciate your patience and support as we work to bring Croc back in the best way possible. Thank you for your understanding and continued enthusiasm. We can't wait for you to experience Croc's magic once again in 2025, Q1 of 2025. So Argonaut Games has been a great studio. They're very vocal and very hands-on. And I think this Legend of the Gobos remaster, I hope it does. I hope it's going to do well. I pre-ordered a physical copy myself. I enjoyed the game when I played it on PS1. It's just the problem was that it was tank controls, and it didn't really, it got very difficult towards the end with the tank controls. And I think with a remaster of this game, I think it'll be perfect to bring the game to the latest generation. And I'm very excited to play it and try it out. Speaking of remasters, The Thing remaster is out now. It actually had a shadow drop over the weekend. It came out on all storefronts, Steam, PlayStation, Xbox for $30. $30 is a bit pricey for me. I would gladly pay $20, but $30 is a bit pricey for me. Usually, the Night Dive Studios does do a bit more of a pricey release for their games. Obviously, they did a lot with it. They updated the textures. They added 4K resolution, 120 frames per second. A lot of the lighting effects and stuff were updated. So, there's a lot of good stuff that they did in here, but $30 is a bit much for my bank right now, especially because I already own the PS2 version of the game. Obviously, like I said, they updated a lot of things. I believe they have save states and stuff like that as well. So it's not like it's a bare bones remake or whatever, but it's still a bit more money that I was willing to spend at this moment. Also, I wanted to buy a physical version of the game. Night Dive Studios usually teams up with Limited Run to do a physical version, so we'll see if a physical version gets announced in the next coming months or so. I hope so, because I do want to own this one physically, and I also want to play it again. And even though we didn't exactly finish it when we played it, I still had a great time, and I thought that it really did a lot of things well. Not great, but well. And we'll see how this is. So once they announce a physical edition, that's when I'm going to be getting it. Until then, have fun playing if you're a digital fan. Okay, I talked about this a little bit. My First Gran Turismo is available right now. It's a free-to-play demo for Gran Turismo 7. Essentially, it gets you a limited number of races to complete, cars to use, and stuff like that. But still a good amount of content that'll give you the general vibe of Gran Turismo in its current state. So yeah, it launched on December 6th, and you can play a couple of race events, time trials, music rallies, and license tests from the game. You also can play the Sunday Cup, Clubman Cup, and the GT Cup, along with doing time trials around Kyoto Driving Park, Deep Forest Raceway, and Trial Mountain. There's 18 vehicles for you to use in the base version of the game, as well as flat screen support, and you can also play the game in PSVR 2 mode. So it pretty much gives you the whole gambit here, just in a bit of a smaller package. I would love to try this out and play this because I've never really played a Gran Turismo. And obviously, Gran Turismo games, they've inflated in, they have so much going on. There's so much to do in these games nowadays. The problem is I don't really have a lot of patience for simulation games. Arcade games, racing games, I can play those all day. But simulation games, I don't have patience for it. I'm always trying to go around a corner too fast or whatever. And that's obviously a personal problem. But I've never really jumped into the Gran Turismo series. So this would be a great place for anyone to really get a vibe for what's going on in the game, how it plays, and maybe in the future I will try this out and check it out and see if I enjoy it. But yeah, we'll go from there. AntonBlast. I talked about this earlier. I forgot to mention this. The game has been delayed on Switch. It is available right now on Steam, PlayStation, I believe Xbox, but the game was delayed on Switch from the 6th of December to the 13th of December. So almost a complete week after the game launched. And this is because they're waiting for the latest update for the Nintendo Switch version. They were very optimistic about launching. I'm sorry, my throat is like all of a sudden really phlegmy. We are very optimistic about launching the Nintendo Switch release day to day with the Steam version in December, but they have been working down to the wire on the Switch version, and the latest update has not been approved by Nintendo just yet, so that's kind of delayed the game a little bit. I do know that Nintendo is a little bit slower with Switch stuff, so usually you need to poke them a little bit, and I guess this is a bit of a poke, I suppose. But they did praise Nintendo. They were like, oh yeah, they're incredible to work with, and we're committed to bringing this game to the Switch in the best experience possible. Blah blah blah. They also said that the Kickstarter backers who wanted the Nintendo Switch key, they can swap their key for a Steam key if they're not willing to wait. And they can fill out the fan gamer survey at any time, or just hold off until the Switch version launches. They'll be doing a Twitch live stream in the morning of the launch on Switch to answer fan questions and showcase the game if you want to check that out. So, the game's been delayed a little bit for Switch, which is unfortunate because that's like that I would say that's probably going to be their biggest fan base is on the Switch. If you want to wait, if you don't want to wait, there's always a Steam version. All right, I know I don't talk about this game a lot anymore, but Suicide Squad Killed the Justice League. The newest season is coming out, and the one reason why I'm talking about this is because Deathstroke is being added to the game as a playable character. Finally, someone who isn't the Joker, who isn't a new character for the DC universe, like the female version of, well, I guess Mrs. Freeze has been around, but someone who is a bit more well-known in the DC universe. We got Slade Wilson, Deathstroke, coming on the 10th of December. Will I be playing the game again? Probably not, even though I enjoyed my time with it enough. I'm probably not going to be going back to the game. People are also predicting that Season 4 is probably going to be the last season of content, even though they haven't mentioned that yet. It seems like that is going to be what's happening. They didn't really tell us much about the character yet. I'm sure there'll be a full reveal next week or in the following week here. Days here. But Deathstroke being added to the game, pretty cool. Obviously, Deathstroke is known for using guns and his sword, so I'm expecting some unique weapons for him and the sword ability. But we want to wait and see for that. But I thought it was pretty cool. I think the design of the character is also nice as well. They did a decent job with the character itself. Deathstroke was a part of the Suicide Squad in a couple of different. There was a couple movie or two, and the comics had him a part of it. I don't know if he was ever implanted with a brain bomb, though. Or maybe if he was, I don't remember. But, whatever. Deathstroke being added to Suicide Squad, Kill the Justice League. Not a bad update for the game. All right, last week I talked about Mighty Morphin Power Rangers Rita's Rewind being delayed for the Switch. But this week they said, oh, nope, it's all good. It's going to release on the same day as everyone else, on the 10th of December. So on their Twitter, they said, excellent news, Rangers. The Nintendo Switch version of Rita's Rewind will be available Tuesday, December 10th, as originally planned, not delayed. Thanks for your understanding as we navigate these unusual last-minute issues. Can't wait for the play next week. I guess that's pretty good that they fixed whatever was going on or got whatever was going on fixed. And if you're a fan of Power Rangers, you'll be able to play it on the same day as everyone else if you own a Switch. Also, they said that they hope to create a physical edition next year. It's too early to reveal anything about that, though. Right now, 2024, the digital-only version will be available. Physical version coming later. So there you go. All right, Power Wash Simulator has released a new seasonal update, including the Ice Rink seasonal update. So essentially what this is a ice rink, as you may have guessed. A very festive ice rink for the holidays. fit with arches and giant baubles and an ice rink itself with plenty of different things to clean, like penguin figurines and Santa and a Christmas tree. Last year they did like the Elf Workshop, which was fine. This one seems a bit more to my liking. I like the idea of cleaning the ice rink. So if you want to check that out, that is available right now to play if you want to play that. All right, let's get into some live services. So Nintendo Switch Online has added Donkey Kong Land 3. I did not get around to playing this one this time around. I played the first two essentially when they released and beat them. Donkey Kong Land 3, I didn't really have time to go and play it while I was playing everything else. I really wanted to finish Brothership this week. Yeah, the game is now available. This one originally released in 1997. And it has like that greenish filter on it from the Game Boy era. So it's a little bit different from the other versions, which were more of like a white and black. So this is more green colors. But yeah, essentially this is the original Game Boy version of the game. I don't know if it mimics or tries to mimic the original experience on the SNES. If it does, then I might not like this one, much like Donkey Kong Land 2. But we'll wait and see. I'll see how that goes. Does this mean that we're going to be getting a Donkey Kong game every week in December? Because obviously Donkey Kong's anniversary is coming up. I don't know. I'm hoping that they release like the Game Boy Donkey Kong game that was kind of like you played as Mario, and it was like the original arcade cabinet, but it changed its formula up halfway through. I would love that. I would also love to see the Game Boy Color versions of Donkey Kong Country because I started with that one. That's actually the first Donkey Kong Country game that I played was the one on Game Boy Color. So that would be pretty cool to play that again. Or maybe they'll add Donkey Kong 64, which is not likely at all, but you never know. Maybe they'll add Donkey Kong 64. We'll have to wait and see. Here are 7 games available right now on Xbox Game Pass. These were added this past week. We have Crash Team Racing Nitro Fueled, DayZ, Dungeons of Hinterberg, Forza Motorsport, Goat Simulator, Haunty, and Humanity. A bunch of those games are ones that I really enjoyed, including Humanity. Last year was on my top 10 games of the year. Crash Team Nitro Kart is also a fun game as well. Here are games that are going to leave the service on the 15th of December, though. We have Amnesia the Bunker, Forager, Forza Horizon 4, Rainbow Billy, The Curse of the Leviathan, Rise of the Tomb Raider, The Quarry, and Tin Hearts. Along with that, Party Animals, their contract with Xbox Game Pass is up on December 31st. So right now, throughout December until January 31st, you'll be able to buy the game at a 50% discount if you have Xbox Game Pass. Only people who have Xbox Game Pass can get this discount. So if you've been playing the game all year or the past 2 years on Xbox Game Pass and their contract's up, so now it's not going to be on Xbox Game Pass on the 31st, they're shutting it down, or not shutting it down, but removing it, you can at least buy the game for a steep discount if you want to keep playing it. So that's very nice of them. Very, very nice of them, of course. And a new soundtrack has been added to Nintendo Music. This soundtrack includes 105 tracks, so I'm not going to go through the entire the entire set list. But the game is from Splatoon 2 and the Octo expansion pack. So 105 tracks from that. I'm not going to read through this entire thing. There's 105 songs on here. If you played Splatoon 2, you kind of know the deal, okay? But yeah, that's all the song. That is the new game that's been added this week to Nintendo Music. I like doing these updates for Nintendo Music. You get to talk about a game that you don't really talk about. Splatoon 2, I've never played, so I can't talk about it. But that's it for the coming soon section. Let's go ahead and close this out with the What's That Song, everyone's favorite section of the podcast, where you try and guess the song name and the game that it came from. If you know those two answers, either put them in the YouTube comments down below and I'll give you a heart and a congratulations, or join the Discord, the Ferret Nation Discord, link down in the description below as well. You can comment in the Ferret 64 section the song name and the game that came from. I will give you a super reaction and a hearty not a heart. I will give you a super reaction, and you will get the admiration of your peers. Let's listen to today's song right now. All right. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the podcast. I am Yemmy the Ferret, and I stream on Twitch Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays. Right now, we're playing we're going through Nintendo games, and we're playing Diddy Kong Racing. We'll probably finish that up on Monday, and we'll move on to something else. Also, I have a YouTube channel, which you're probably on right now. If you want to check out the video version of the podcast, I would appreciate that. If you just slap a like on it, even if you're listening to the audio version of the podcast, I would appreciate that. Rate it out of 5 on Spotify or leave a review on Apple Podcasts. I would also greatly appreciate that as well. Also, YouTube VODs channel, Yemmy the Ferret VODs, for the VODs of all my streams that I've done in the past since the beginning of my Twitch streaming. Well, after the first month of Twitch streaming, there's a couple games that I'm missing, but still, very, very long tenure there. Also, you can check out the Ferret football channel, where I recap weekly football games if you want to check that out as well. All right, folks, have a great rest of your day. Have a great rest of your week. I am the Ferret, and I'm out of here. So long.
The Ferret 64 podcast is owned and edited by Yemmy the Ferret. Small sound clips used throughout the podcast were made by Yemmy the Ferret. The song in the intro and outro is Nightshade by Adhesive Wombat. The Ferret 64 logo was made by Player2P2. News sources include PushSquare.com, NintendoLife.com, and PureXbox.com. All opinions, video game related, are my own. Thank you for listening.